Hi, everyone. Today I have with me James Tarbox, Ph.D. He is the Executive Director of Career Services at San Diego State University, which offers 95 bachelor's degree programs, 78 master's programs, and 22 doctoral programs. Go SDSU. James leads a team that is committed to the success of SDSU's 36,000 students and more than 400,000 alumni. Wow, James, that's a lot. Well, so how did you imagine your career path being during your undergrad years at Bates College?
So during my undergrad at Bates, what I was really focused on was becoming a teacher because I was so committed to making a difference. So many teachers in my life had really been catalysts for change, and I wanted to do that for other people. So I was very, very committed at that point. I was actually looking at private high schools in New England and becoming a teacher in one of them, and I'd been really passionate about that. And my undergrad advisor said, you know what, James, I think you should look at graduate school. And that changed my life in many, many ways because he believed in me and he offered an option that I hadn't ever thought of. And then he said, this is how we'll pursue it. And the rest is history in terms of being able to go from Bates to Penn State.
That's so cool. So it's sometimes you need to hear it from someone else to really believe it for yourself.
You absolutely do. And I found that I was a professor for a while, visiting professor at a couple of institutions. And I've got to tell you, from that perspective, being in that role of a teacher and making a difference in an individual's life, when you say to them, in essence, tap them on the shoulder and say, have you thought about this? I can almost guarantee that most times that person hasn't because they think I'm not smart enough or I'm not this enough or I don't have this. And what the person does by tapping that other person on the shoulder is say, hey, look at this option. Think about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So that's what inspired you to continue your education. So you continued in communications for your master's and PhD at Penn State. And then later on, you went to Harvard for higher education for a certificate.
Yep.
So how did you know that you wanted to keep on learning, keep on going in this path?
Well, just to backtrack a little bit to Bates, when I was a little bit hesitant at first when he was my honors thesis advisor, and he said, James, I really think we need to look at graduate school. Well, I wasn't particularly thrilled about doing research. And he said, you know what you could do is you'll be able to get a graduate teaching assistantship. And the other thing that I wasn't thrilled about was incurring debt. And he said, trust me when I tell you, you're a really viable candidate. And so I applied to 5 different programs. I got full scholarships to all of them. And then Penn State was the one that gave me the best package and really aligned with my values in terms of where I was taking my career at that point. And so in terms of continuing into Penn State, there was this pivotal moment. Do you mind if I share a quick story?
Yeah, no. And I feel like there's so many listeners out there that are struggling with do I go back to school? Do I continue my education? Or do I take a break and enter the workforce and then consider going back to school? There's so many questions around this. So yeah, I want to hear the story that you have.
Well, thanks. So I was between my master's and my PhD, and I went to work for this multinational corporation, and I was put in their training and development department. And at the end of the summer, I'm in Chicago, and I get this amazing offer. It was like 5 times what I was making as a teaching assistant. So you can imagine I was really thrilled, and I called my mom and I said, hey, I've got this offer for a job, and I'm thinking about it. And she said, I think you should take it. And she was saying that because her perspective was she wanted to see me secure in a job. And what I did was I went back to what you would call my passion. And I thought, what do I really want to do with my life? I went back to the core of me. And this is where I see, by the way, a lot of students in their sophomore years when they're changing majors and things, they kind of have the separation from their parents, as it were, in terms of understanding what motivates them and where they want to go. And what I said to my mother was, Mom, I am so committed to becoming better at teaching and to really educating myself. And I don't feel like I'm done. And I feel like if I take this job, I'm going to not pursue my life's passion, as it were. And she said, okay, well, trust your judgment. And she said, in essence, take that leap. And I went back to Penn State. I got another full scholarship. And I was really able to become much better at who I wanted to be as a professional in terms of thinking things through, understanding what it takes to make a difference. It really was life-changing to take that risk. And I think sometimes you need to take a risk, calculate a risk, but you need to risk,
Well, so I love this story because I think that you actually had that moment before you saw yourself going off that path where your passion lied. Like you had that moment where you did you paused and you
Yeah.
said, what do I really want? And you knew that if you went in this other direction, you would be taking a step away in a different direction, and you wouldn't be as intentional about going forward with your passion. So I love what you're saying about you see these students around sophomore year starting to make a change in their choice in major or their path in some way because they're starting to form their decisions independent of their parents. And why do you think this is that they're pivoting around sophomore year?
Yeah, I think, and that's a really good question, Amanda. What I think happens in higher ed is sophomore year is really the year when you are solidifying your commitments to the university. So you're looking at doing things like studying abroad in your junior year, an internship, and most importantly, what's your academic emphasis? And if you came in thinking you were one thing and the coursework you've taken or the grades you're getting, any number of contributing factors leads you to pause. During that pause, it's usually, and this is my experience of being an undergraduate advisor to about 500 majors at one point in my life, usually what that is this time where you say, I feel like I may disappoint person X or A or B. And what I'm finding when I talk, think through these things with myself is I'm real clear about these values. I'm starting to get clarity around meaning. And I think, by the way, I took this class over here at one point and I really liked it and I was really successful and I may go in that direction. And so that's why I think sophomore year is so pivotal is there's lots of questions. It's really kind of a messy time in terms of everything's up in the air before you've solidified. So I think that's where students hit up against it.
Yeah. Well, I would love to dive into a day in your life as the Executive Director of Career Development and Services at SDSU. What does it look like for you?
Okay, so let's go big picture and let's look at just the day.
Okay.
I arrive at work at about 6:30 a.m. And wouldn't it be funny if I arrived at 6:30 p.m.? I arrive at 6:30 a.m. and from about 6:30 to 8 when our office opens, that's when I'm doing a lot of different project works from the night before. Like at home, I may have started something or I have to, edit or review a budget or look at documents from one of my team members. So I'm doing that from 6:30 to 8. And at 8, we start our day. And my day usually consists of meetings with my team. So I have several people who report up to me, and I have several managers who report up to me. Just a lot of checking in with people, see where we are with our goals, see where we are with our year, what are we doing in terms of students. And then I shift over to meetings on campus. So I'll be meeting a lot with faculty and other administrators. I meet a lot with my colleagues who are helping us with programming. I often am involved with student meetings. So there are committees and student leaders, and we have something called Associated Students, and I sit on a couple of committees that are affiliated with that. So
I interviewed your past president, Chris Thomas, on my
podcast. Yeah, Chris, exactly.
Such an inspirational leader with his vision for leaving a heartprint on your campus.
Oh, that was really phenomenal. I am so thankful that Chris actually brought that in. I think it was really well timed. But yeah, so the day is kind of a composite of all those things, and I'm often getting called out of meetings because there's some big project or something that I'm needed to support. And so I usually am very, very flexible. I think that's my mantra is just be flexible. Don't be thrown when you get, something that is you're called on to do.
Yeah, well, everything sounds so big and so high level. Can you help root this into what's one project that is happening right now or one of your goals that's happening right now that you can help our listeners understand, when you're in charge of career development at an entire university with thousands of students, what's a big project? What does that look like? What is one of your initiatives right now?
So one of our initiatives right now is the Aztec Mentor Program. It's a mentor program that we've been growing over the last 5 years. We were in our 6th year this year, and we just exceeded 10,000 matches, which is a really big deal.
Oh my gosh, I think that's so important. That's so cool. So you're telling me a student can come into career services and say, look, I need one of these mentors. I don't know how to get one. And you hook it up.
We do. Actually, we have a program that runs, it kind of runs in parallel with classes. So in terms of, what that involves is we have a student advisory board for the Aztec Mentor Program. We're starting in a mentor advisory board. But a lot of the projects that I'm involved with are the online system that we use to manage it, talking to students about their experience with it. I'm a mentor myself, so I get really granular in terms of I understand the experience, and then you go really big picture in terms of asking the university for institutional resources to help this, working across campus with alumni. We just did a big thank you event up in close to North County, where we had alumni and just said, thank you for being mentors in this last year. And I've got to tell you, it's so rewarding to be there with these people and hear all their stories about the different ways that they've impacted students and how long they've been involved with the program and where they see it going. So that's an example of the many kind of offshoots of a project and how you have to be aware of what's going on all the time. And in essence, keeping your finger on the pulse so you can make really informed decisions. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're incredibly busy. I mean, because you're not just thinking about the students that are on your campus right there, but you're staying in touch with all these alumni because they're incredible resources that you want to connect with and partner with. And like, for example, they're serving as these mentors for your current students. Well, so mentorship, I think, is I kind of want to touch on this for a moment here. I just think mentorship is this funny thing that almost, it sounds a little bit scary to a young professional, right? Because if they don't have a mentor, they're like, how do I get one? How do I connect with one? What do I do to show up for a mentor? And I like to tell them that it's more about building a relationship, and it becomes a mentorship. You don't kind of go in and you're like, you're my mentor. This is how it's going to be. Although it seems like with your structured program, you're giving them a little bit more of that. You're helping that along a little bit more. What would you say to students to help set them up for success in having a wonderful mentorship?
Well, first and foremost, I really like what you said, Amanda, in terms of it would feel kind of scary to someone, I think, to say, you're my mentor without there being a relationship. So I think part of it is learning how to develop relationships. So specifically on our campus, there are approximately 15 peer-to-peer mentoring programs that focus on first and second year students. Then they transition into the Aztec mentor program in their sophomore and junior year. So what we're trying to do is work with them as they make that transition in their sophomore and junior years to be able to understand that in addition to developing a relationship, what's really cool about this and what's really challenging to navigate is you're going across generations. So we often recommend, for example, you don't start texting the person, but that you actually talk to them a little bit before and kind of get their permission.
Wait a minute. You're telling me I can't have just like a text mentorship relationship with someone with like a 40-year-old?
Well, it's important to understand, how different, and it's really, really, it's humorous, but it's also really serious in terms of you don't go into a workplace and start your job with a text, right? We go into a classroom and we interact with people. So, if we're in bricks and mortar, as it were. So it's really important to say, in essence, what do I get to learn here? How do I develop those relationships? What's the difference in terms of my expectation and this person who's from a different generation when it comes to mentoring and communicating? I mean, so it's really exciting, and it's fun to see all the different opportunities there are for relationship development and communication styles. It's a really, really interesting laboratory or incubator, as it were.
I think the thread that spans all generations is, I'd like to say, coffee. Take someone to coffee. Most people won't turn down coffee. Well, so let's go into a day in the life. So we did the big picture. What's a day in the life like, right? So we know that you get in 6:30, you start your day at 8. What did yesterday look like?
So yesterday, we're in the middle right now of a couple of big initiatives where we are rewriting position descriptions. So I've been spending a lot of time coaching my team and doing my own revisions on position descriptions using the university standards. Yesterday also involved, I'm an editor for a journal, the Journal of Student Affairs Research and Practice, and I've got 2 articles that I'm editing right now. So part was that. Yesterday was also putting some finishing touches on a couple of conference proposals that I'm doing. So I'm setting the fall up right now too, talking to our team about what are the workshops we're going to be offering, how we're going to roll out the Aztec Mentor Program. Another big initiative we have is internships. What are going to be our goals around internships? Over the last 6 years, we can verify approximately 30,000 students doing internships at San Diego State. So lots of putting pieces in place, because fall doesn't just magically happen. Like when we get to fall, there's got to have been a lot of planning. And so you're seeing a lot of behind the scenes administrative work, programming work, and marketing. And we, by the way, yesterday also we finished interviewing for a new position that's coming into our office. So it's a lot of these sorts of things, you know?
That's so exciting. So if you're listening in and you're like, I know I want to get involved on the university level, being part of the bigger picture of making the vision happen for this university, this is what a day-to-day looks like. It doesn't sound like you're at your desk all the time. You're really in a lot of meetings. It sounds like there's a lot of collaboration. You're recruiting, you're running programs, and you're also, you've got this countdown too to like the students are coming back, and that you need to help set these students up for success. Like you want to make sure 30,000 students are going to have internships. That's a big goal.
It is a big goal, and it's a lot of prep work. And what I want to say too is that making a difference has kind of been my mantra. And I go to work. I never go to work feeling like, oh my God, I have to go to work. And I never leave work feeling like, oh, this isn't for me. I always feel really inspired. And when I've got those moments, like when I'm dealing with budget or when I'm dealing with whatever, I have a quote on my desk from Stephen Covey that says, leadership is a choice, not a position. And I just look at that and I say, okay, James, remember what motivates you. And I'm saying all that because, in essence, anyone can do my job. They really can. It's just they have to look at what they want from life and start to build toward it with some intention, and be really thoughtful about the choices they make, even as far back as an undergrad. You never realize how that's going to come back to influence who you become later.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've really followed your passion and you come back to your why every day in your work. And it sounds, I can just sense it from you, what that feels like, but can you put it into words? What does it feel like to work in your passion on a daily basis?
Oh, it feels super, I hope I don't sound corny because it's not, but it sounds really rewarding. And the other thing that I know is, I often ask this to people when I used to be a career counselor. I'd say to them, the last time you were doing something that you enjoyed when you lost track of time, what was it?
Yes.
And I can tell you, oftentimes my day will melt away and I'll be like, wow, everything I did today was really great. It's like, and again, I don't mean to sound, I'm being super, super sincere. And I've built my life to that point where I can do things like work on writing. And you'd think that an executive director doesn't have to do a lot of writing. I do. I'm constantly writing. And I love that part of it. I'm doing a lot of analysis. I'm getting to work with people and make a difference with them, my staff, our students, the campus. It's really cool, if that's the right way to put it, how it's all turned out. In terms of the passion, it's there every day. And it's in a lot of different things that I do. It's just being cognizant of that.
Well, and I think when you follow your passion, especially in your position, there is a ripple effect, and the effect that you have on everybody that you're working with, and also the impact that it has on these students. Do you get to see, is there an example of a student that you worked with, years ago, and then you got to see them come back and give that thanks? And not everybody knows to do that, to come back and give that thanks, but I'm sure you get to see some of that full circle.
Oh, I do. And I'll share a really quick story. So when I was a professor of communication studies, I had a student and she wrote a paper on The Simpsons, and she got an A in it. And I said to her, if you're willing to work with me on this over the next 6 months, we'll take it to the UC Davis Rhetoric Conference. It's a competition of undergraduates and graduate students. And we worked on it for 6 months. And we were flying up on the plane and we were talking about it. And she gets there, she won. She beat everybody. She got first place. But what was fascinating is it gets better. We're on the plane going back, and I said, I forgot to ask you, what are your plans for next year? I was still a professor at this point, not a career services director. And she said, I don't have any. And I said, what? And she said, well, I wanted to apply to Annenberg West, but I didn't think I was smart enough. And I said, oh, we've got to do this. I said, I know graduate programs really well. We put in an application. They accepted her late admit, and they found a scholarship for her.
Oh my gosh.
Tap on the shoulder, right? Tap on the shoulder.
See, and now for listeners, you hear these stories. It doesn't always happen for you like that, where someone does find you, but you can find them, because that's why things like career services exist. Like you can literally walk in those doors and be like, I'm totally clueless. I'm totally lost. I don't feel smart enough. You can say that. I know we all have these feelings, and they will give it to you straight. They will let you know, like, hey, you know what? Maybe your GPA isn't where it needs to be for this certain graduate program, but I do see this opportunity for you. And they're going to help open up your world to things that you wouldn't necessarily see. I like to think of us as, students, or as we're growing up, we're kind of looking with binoculars on. We can't always see what else is out there. And until you take that, it's that courage step, right? Showing up, like walking through those doors of such an amazing resource like career services. Take that step in there and just say, I'm here, I'm showing up. I want to figure out what's next for me. I want to see what's possible. That's when you can start, having more of those tap on your shoulder moments and creating those mentorship experiences. And it's going to be life-changing. I'm sure that student, that moment right there was a life-changing moment for her.
I think it was. And I've heard from her a few times over the years, and I'm so proud of her. And that's happened many, many times, by the way. That's the one that comes to mind. And I just want to, reiterate what you're saying, Amanda, about coming in. I always tell students, you don't have to come in for any reason. Just come in and say hi and talk about your major. And you don't know what will come out of that conversation. You really don't. And I often, by the way, engage students when I'm on these committees, and I'll just say, or even at the coffee shops that are on campus, I'll say, what's your major? What are you planning to do with that? And oftentimes, because I'm a regular, they'll be like, what do you do on campus? And I'll say, I'm the executive director for the Career Center. I want you to come in. Just come in and talk, have this conversation with someone,
Yeah. And I love that you bring students back to the thing that they can do for hours on end, and like the time is melting away, that image. But that's so true, because that's like, I call it like you're getting in the zone. And if you imagine if your career could be like that, and that does happen. That's very true. I get in the zone in my work, and those are some of my best days. And it sounds like when you're writing, like you're getting in the zone, or when you're working with a student, having those conversations. And like, that's what a career can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's absolutely what a career can be.
It's fulfilling to you, and you're adding value. You're making an impact, and there's a ripple effect. Okay. So James, tell me about the object you brought and how it reflects your passion.
Absolutely. So the object I brought is the statue of Ganesha. And Ganesha is a Hindu deity. And in my mind, he represents perseverance and wisdom. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I got him, and then I'll tell you about how he works for me in terms of passion. One of my younger brothers was studying in Sri Lanka when he was an undergrad. So this is about 35 years ago. And he brought this back for me. And he said, James, when I learned about this deity, I thought about you. And he gave me that little statue, and I've had it with me through 10 or 15 moves, and I have it on my desk, and it sits on a little statue that says hope. And so for me, wisdom and perseverance allow you to work toward hope always. And I've got to tell you, the wisdom piece is really important, because as I was mentioning before, life is a journey. That we go through, and we've got to constantly ask questions and learn. And what I think Ganesha does for me is constantly remind me of, what's the wisdom you're taking away from all of this?
Yeah. And at every step on the journey, you're still learning.
Absolutely.
And guys, hear this from James. He's a Ph.D., right? He has all these certificates, all this education, all this knowledge. He's what I would say at the top of his career, and he's still telling you that wisdom is so important, that continual learning is so important, and that it really is a journey.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
What do you believe is the greatest challenge that students struggle with when it comes to figuring out their career and getting that first job?
So I think we've talked about it, but I've got to tell you honestly, I just think it's starting. And I'll tell you, I think there are two big roadblocks to why students don't start the process. I think the first one is, I think something I've already talked about, which is feeling like you have to have the answer before you come into career services, or before you start to go into whatever your career path is going to be. What I would say is to flip that and to say, start your process by asking yourself, what are the questions I want to answer? What are the questions I want to answer? I think the other thing that happens, and this is especially true in most higher ed in the United States, is we have amazing campuses. San Diego State is an amazing place to be a student. I'll just use us as an example. And I think it's amazing. And I think you can get so involved here. And let's say you have a part-time job and you're on campus doing student leadership, and you're also doing a philanthropy for Greek life. It's hard to look up and focus on careers when you're so engaged in what's going on. And so I think there was an excellent article in the Wall Street Journal in, I think it was May, by a person who was talking about the fact that we have 2 million graduates getting ready to graduate. And what's happened is so many have been so immersed in student life that they haven't had the opportunity to prepare with something like an internship or a mentorship. And so what you have is people who have to kind of get caught up a little bit after graduation. So when we think about the process of career development starting, putting a stake in the ground, making a small commitment to ask those questions, making a small commitment to maybe include an internship one semester is really, I think, the big challenge that a lot of students are facing. I really do.
And it's never too early and it's never too late to start.
Right.
Start now. Start today. You're listening? Start now if you haven't already. And so, yeah, that's walking into the doors of the career services. It's hitting that pause button. I love to say that, but I think it's so important because we are inundated with text messages and Netflix and, all of our extracurriculars and Greek life. And there's so much coming our way that we really are going through the motions. And It's not that we're totally sleepwalking, we're alert and going through these motions intentionally, but sometimes we really do need to pause, reflect, and say to ourselves, where do I light up? What do I really love?
Yeah.
What do I get most excited about, right? Do I need to be doing all these things, or could I get more intentional? And could I start establishing what I want to do for my career? And that's going to be, going to career services, figuring out is grad school for you, figuring out what internships make the most sense for you. And so you can get that, experience and try those experiences out, right? Try those internships, live a day in the life of that potential career to see, is this what I like doing? Do I like being at that desk, or do I like being in meetings, or do I like writing? And understanding what's, where you have that flow. Just
Absolutely.
Like
and one other thing I think, Amanda, too, that happens is that I think we all need to, as individuals, understand who we are as part of broader communities. So if you're a veteran, let's say if you're a person of color, if you are Latinx, or if you are, for example, LGBTQ+, all of those factors, your identity comes into play and impacts all of that. So when you start your process, keep in mind that the person that you've been on campus needs to modify and change, and you need to start developing those same communities as you get out into your professional life. And so passion meets identity, meets career, meets community. There's a lot of intersection.
I think that's so cool, right? And the university is kind of like this mini, it's this mini world, right? It's a little like bubble. I like to call it the bubble. I was in it. I remember what that was like. And for you to say, I want to be part of this club because it aligns with my values or aligns with my identity, and just know that exists outside the bubble too. So continuing that and continuing to lean on those resources of those communities.
Yeah, and think about it. When you're in your career and you make a transition, you've already learned how to do things as a result of transferring from university to career that you'll need from career to career. Those lessons don't go away, but you have to take the risk and start them.
Yes, the risk. Anytime you do something that's a little bit scary, right? Like walking into that first meeting for a club, or walking into career services. I can't say that enough, right? But it's a little bit scary, right? Meeting with a mentor for the first time. It's just like going on that first date. You got to get through it, because after that, it gets that much easier, right? The second date, the third date, and before you know it, you're living together. Okay, wait, I went too far on this metaphor, but you have to really take that risk. And when you look back on that risk that you took, going on that first date, taking that first step, we never regret it. Because it's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity for change, for growth. And that's what this journey is all about. I mean, that's why you're in school. Yeah. And And yeah. All right. Well, so I want to leave everyone with some career advice. I'm going to get really pointed here. Okay. So what career advice do you have for college students today?
Okay. So, and I may need to put my glasses on in just a minute because I've been thinking through some of these things. Well, the first one is start with you where you are and start now. Take that risk. That's really important. I'm going to borrow a little bit from Brene Brown. And I love her.
I won't protest that. She's awesome. Go for it.
She often talks about life being messy. And I've got to tell you, career development is messy because it forces you to experiment. It forces you to question any assumptions you have. It forces you to risk who you are as you move forward into who you will be. So there's a lot of messiness with career development, and you've got to be in the messiness to gain. There's no better way to say it. Yeah, you got to do that internship or try that teaching assistantship or do any of those things to say, all those assumptions I had about teaching were wrong or they were right, and I love them. And I want to continue to do it. So start where you are, start now. Really understand that this is a messy process. Because it's a messy process, build a community. You've got a community at the university of friends, etc., but be really intentional as you're coming out of the university and say to yourself, what do I need in terms of my community? Do I try on my ideas about who I am with these folks? Can they be contacts for additional, development? We often talk in career services about networking, but for me, community is broader. It's networking, and it's that safe place where you get to try things on, experiment, get support from people. Because, when we're going through those job interviews, it's not like you get a hug when you come into the office for the interview.
Right. You need that mock interview with someone that's your cheerleader, that's your friend, that you share a passion and they can, root for you and be like, yeah, that was a good answer. So that way, when you do go into the interview, you don't need to hear that feedback. Like, that was a good answer. Absolutely. That was a good answer.
And the last piece is that, and it may sound trivial, but I've got to tell you, you've already pointed to it several times with your comment, to understand that this is a journey. And I think sometimes, because we're taught to think in terms of destinations, think about it. When you fly, you're going to a destination. Doing a vacation, you're going to a destination. Applying to college, you're going to a destination. But we often forget that there's a journey involved. And part of that journey is understanding what gives you meaning, where is your passion, how do you manage setback, how do you impact others, who are you becoming? All of that's part of the journey. And so, again, big picture thinking, treat this as a journey, and that there's going to be a lot of different things we're all going to experience. Whereas if we focus, like you said, the binoculars, if we focus on the destination, we forget that there's a lot of in-betweens where we can really learn, we can really gain, and we can really grow.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. And it also keeps you open to the flexibility and the possibility of things that we haven't considered, right? Yeah. When things aren't going the way that we thought, when we can be more flexible with that end goal, because it really isn't about that. It's important to set the goal and to go toward it, but that can change.
Oh, absolutely. And we all go toward our goals in different ways. There's many different paths to the same goal. And you need to be flexible to the fact that what you thought was going to be the case may not be the case, and you got to retool and recommit.
Most likely will not be the case. Most likely. I think that's almost like that should be day one of like welcome to life. Like that should be, if there was like a packet, that's what you get the first day.
I love that. I absolutely agree.
Well, I want to leave everyone with one thing, one takeaway, one homework assignment that we have from James today, which is, what are the questions you want to answer? I want you today to write down, it could just be one question, it could be 1 to 2 to 3, a couple questions that you want to answer about your career. So instead of making decisions and knowing the answer, write the question, because that's the kind of questions you want to show up with when you walk into career services or when you speak to a potential mentor. And that's going to allow you to open up to possibility, because you're going to be discovering the answer. You don't have to know all the answers. Well, thank you so much, James, for coming onto the podcast. It was wonderful speaking with you. I want to tell everyone, just remember, when you speak your passion, doors open. Thank you so much for listening in. And, I really appreciate you taking the time to think about your career journey. And I, hope that this has been an inspiration for you. If it has, please be sure to subscribe. You can leave a review. And most importantly, reach out to me. I want to hear your questions, just like this question. What questions are you looking for the answers for? Email me at amanda@findyourpassioncareer.com. And thanks so much. Bye, everyone.